Fellowship Farm. Book 13. Junior Youth Can Move the World. In the 13th book of the Fellowship Farm series, the Fitzgerald family learn that service can sometimes be fun and can sometimes be boring, cold, and difficult. Leezah has many opportunities to develop her courage, and the family say a teary goodbye to a dear friend. Chapter 1. Feeding the Joey. It wasn't even 5 o'clock, but the sun had set on Fellowship Farm. The winter air was icy. 7-year-old Alinga Fitzgerald shivered in the boot room at the back of the farmhouse. He put on his warm coat, woolen hat and yellow gumboots. When he was dressed, he picked up a large glass bottle with a big black rubber teat on the end. His mother, Romy, had filled it with warm Wombaroo milk. The outside lights shone on the path that led from the back garden down the side of the house to the front garden. Out the back, just visible in the setting sun, was a large patch of lawn, edged on 3 sides by rose beds and a fence. To the right was a large cage full of pigeons, now sleeping on their perches. Between the pigeons and the house was a large, brightly painted doghouse. Inside the doghouse were 3 8-month-old puppies, Flea, Flex, and Fizz. When they heard Alinga, they came scuttling out of their house and galloping up the lawn and steps to greet him. Normally, Alinga would have loved to play with them, but he had an important job to do. He also didn't want to drop the bottle of Wombaroo milk. So with one hand he patted their bobbing heads and gently pushed them away. Alinga carefully slid open the wooden barrier that temporarily separated the back garden from the front garden. He squeezed himself through as quickly as he could without letting the puppies through. Then he pulled the barrier closed. The puppies stood on the other side, tongues out, wagging their tails. Their panting breath made fumes of steam in the cold air. "Go back to bed, you silly gooses," said Alinga with a smile, and clumped down the side of the house. At the front, hanging on an old fence post, was a pouch. The pouch was made of a bag lined with old woolen jumpers, which were covered in old cotton pillowcases. As Alinga approached, a large joey pulled itself out of the pouch and moved slowly toward Alinga. Alinga hid the bottle behind his back. The wallaby knew exactly why Alinga was there, and it started to snuffle at Alinga's waist and stretch its head around Alinga's back. Alinga giggled as the joey nudged at him. "Good determination, Joey," he said, nearly toppling over. Alinga brought the bottle to the front of his body and tipped it up so the teat was facing the mouth of the wallaby. The wallaby immediately began to gobble the milk. Alinga had to hold on tightly to the bottle. Nearly 1 month earlier, the Fitzgerald family had rescued the wallaby from the side of the road. Its mother had been hit by a car. It was already quite big when its mother was killed. Romy, who was the town vet, thought the wallaby was probably about 9 months old now. The family was reducing the number of milk feeds. The wallaby was now given milk only once in the morning and once at night. It was also given some pellet food. But it was free to move around the front garden and eat the grass and other plants growing there. Soon it would be time to take it up to the back paddock and set it free into the bush. Alinga really didn't want to do that. He loved feeding the wallaby with the special milk and watching it move around the overgrown front garden. When the wallaby had finished all the milk, it kept butting the bottle and sucking, hoping for more. It always seemed to be hungry. "That's all for tonight, Joey," said Alinga. He pulled the teat from the wallaby's mouth.
You'll have to get your own food from the garden now.
It seemed like the wallaby understood Alinga's words. He turned aside and slowly lolloped towards the long grass growing near the front gate. Alinga went inside to join his family. Inside the farmhouse, Alinga's father, Flip, had lit the fire in the living room. The flames were blazing in the fireplace, sparks flew up the chimney, and the dry wood crackled. Leezah and Sky Marie were changing out of their farm clothes. The 3 children had just finished the farm chores before Alinga went to feed the wallaby. They put on clean, warm tracksuit pants, skivvies, jumpers, and woolly socks. Alinga did the same. Romy had arrived home from her veterinary surgery just in time to make up the Wombaroo milk. When Alinga came back into the house, she was also changing out of her work clothes into some warm and comfortable house clothes. Flip had been on the farm all day. He was dirty and sweaty. So he took his shower and put on his warm pajamas before dinner. The children could hear him singing loudly. I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, I'm happy again. This was followed by a loud gurgling sound. Soon afterward, Flip came out of his bedroom in his flannelette pajamas and dressing gown. On his feet were Ugg boots made of sheepskin. His damp hair was sticking straight up. Alinga was wiping and setting the dining table in the living room. In the kitchen, Leezah was chopping potatoes. Sky Marie was chopping carrots, and Romy was cutting meat into small strips. On the stove, a pot with frying onion was sizzling. The pot would soon be full of ingredients for the stew. As Flip walked through the living room, he heard Alinga talking to himself while he worked.
Fork on the left, knife on the right, bowl in the middle, napkin on the left, glass on the right.
When he saw his father, Alinga started to laugh. What's up, Doc? Asked Flip.
Your hair, Daddy,
replied Alinga. You're just jealous, said Flip, with wide eyes and a serious face.
You look like a galah,
Alinga chuckled. Oh no, you have discovered my secret identity. With a large galah-like screech, Flip flapped his arms and swooped on Alinga, wrapping him in a big hug and lifting him off his feet. Don't tell anyone, he whispered with a wink as he lowered his son back down in the front of the table and went into the kitchen to help prepare dinner. When dinner was ready, the Fitzgerald family sat up at the table. Before they started to eat, Sky Marie said,
I was reading a book about a family who lived by a beach. There were 2 children called Joy and Lee. Before every meal, they would always say a little prayer. I really like it. I was thinking we could say it before we eat too.
Sounds great, darling, said Romy. Why don't you say it for us tonight? Everyone closed their eyes and bowed their heads in reverence. Sky said,
May we eat this food with thanks and use its energy to help all beings live together in peace, love, joy, and harmony.
After a few seconds of silence, the family started to eat.
Yum!
said Alinga. What a beautiful prayer, said Flip.
What's the book called? asked Leezah. It's called The Island of Indira. It's really good. The children keep wishing they could turn into mermaids. They wish on everything, shooting stars, birthday candles, all sorts of things. And then a day comes when they have made the same wish 1,000 times. At that moment, they turn into mermaids. They have all sorts of adventures under the sea, and in the end,
they get eaten by a shark, suggested Flip.
Don't tell me, said Leezah. I want to read it.
The warm stew with crusty buttered buns was delicious. The fire heated the living room. The Fitzgeralds shared news of their day at work and school. Then Alinga said,
Dad, what's in this stew?
The usual, Ollie. Spider's eyes, snake's tongues, mouldy cheese, a sprinkle of flies, and fur balls of cat.
Daddy,
said Alinga.
Mum, what's in the stew?
Onions, carrots, potatoes, and meat, replied Romy.
What kind of meat?
Asked Alinga. Tonight we are having kangaroo meat, but sometimes we make stew with lamb, beef, or chicken. Slowly, Alinga stopped eating. He seemed lost in deep thought, and he looked a little worried. His bowl was still half full. By the time everyone else finished their stew and their bread rolls, Alinga's bowl was still half full. Have you had enough to eat, Possum? Asked Flip. The family always stayed at the table until everyone had finished their meal, so they were all waiting for Alinga. He didn't answer the question. Instead, he pushed his bowl away and said,
So, what's the difference between the kangaroo we are eating and the wallaby we are taking care of?
Chapter 2, Setting a Noble Goal. With a nod from Romy, Leezah and Sky Marie started to clear the table. Romy and Flip sat with Alinga. There's not really any difference, said Romy slowly, answering Alinga's question. Alinga's eyes widened and started to fill with tears. His chest felt tight. His tummy felt like it was being tied in knots.
So that means that eating kangaroo stew is like eating Joey?
Romy paused. Then she said, Well, yes, Ollie. In a way, it is.
And eating chicken is like eating kangarooster?
Said Ollie, referring to the pet rooster the family had bought from the Kellyton markets. Well, yes.
But that's terrible,
said Alinga. Tears started to run from his eyes, and his nose started running too. Flip passed him a tissue.
I would never eat Joey or kangarooster.
Alinga was starting to sob. He wondered why he had never thought about it before.
What's the difference between eating a cow and eating the cows we feed every day? What's the difference between eating lamb and eating Flea, Flex, and Fizz?
He sobbed. Well, Ollie, it's true. They are all animals, and they all have the same feelings. Alinga sat for a long while thinking about what he had just realized. Gradually, his tears stopped flowing. He leaned his elbows on the table and rested his chin in his hands. He closed his eyes. Romy and Flip looked at each other. They decided to leave Ollie to think, and they went to help the girls in the kitchen. When Alinga opened his eyes again, the table was clear and the kitchen was tidy. Leezah, Sky, and Romy were having showers. Flip was reading on the couch by the fire. Alinga felt very tired. He left the table and went to sit on the couch with his dad. He leaned against Flip's shoulder and Flip stroked Ollie's head.
I never ever want to eat meat again, Daddy,
said Alinga quietly. Okay, Possum, done. No more meat for Ollie, said Flip. They sat quietly together, watching the fire crackle and flame.
And I think we should all stop eating meat,
added Alinga. Let's consult about that, suggested Flip. When everyone's finished their showers, we can have a family consultation. Alinga nodded. Flip stood up and went to the bookcase. He pulled out a Baha'i book called Lights of Guidance. Alinga went to get his pajamas and have a shower. When Romy, Leezah, Sky Marie and Alinga joined Flip in the living room, they were happy to find 5 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Flip had heated a big pot of milk and added lots of honey and cocoa powder. They each took a mug and sat on the floor or couches by the fire. Neither Leezah nor Sky Marie had any homework, so each of them was planning to read until bedtime. Sky was reading Prince Caspian, and Leezah was reading A Wrinkle in Time. When everyone was settled and had started sipping their drinks, Flip said, "Nice chocolate milk moustaches, everyone. And more importantly, we would like to have a family consultation." He looked at Alinga. It was getting close to Alinga's bedtime and he was feeling quite sleepy. But Alinga said,
I would like to let you know I am not going to eat meat ever again. I don't think it's kind or just or helpful or friendly.
Or compassionate, added Leezah.
Yes, said Alinga, or compassionate. And I would like to suggest we all practice our compassionate and kindness.
Practice our compassion by not eating meat, Ollie? Asked Romy.
Yes,
said Alinga. Flip read from Lights of Guidance. Abdu'l-Baha says, the food of man is cereals and fruit. He is not in need of meat. Even without eating meat, he would live with the utmost vigour and energy. The killing of animals and the eating of their meat is somewhat contrary to pity and compassion, and if one can content oneself with cereals, fruit, oil and nuts, such as pistachios, almonds and so on, it would undoubtedly be better and more pleasing.
So no more bacon? No more sausages?
No more roasts?
No more ham sandwiches? No more hamburgers on the barbecue?
Asked Sky Marie. Ollie hadn't thought of all those things. He loved bacon and eggs on the weekends and barbecues on holy days. His voice was a little wobbly as he said, Nope, no more. But then he remembered Joey, Kanga, Flea, Flex, Fizz and Bonnie the horse.
No more meat,
he said more firmly.
It makes sense,
said Leezah.
What will we eat instead?
Asked Sky Marie. Chocolate, suggested Flip. Sky's face lit up. Pipe down, Pipsqueak, said Romy to Flip and crossed her eyes at him. We could do an experiment for a month, she suggested. We could see how we go. We've read the guidance of Abdu'l-Baha. We have had some consultation. Now we can take action. Then we can reflect. That's how the Universal House of Justice tells us to learn about anything. Study, consult, act, reflect. Everyone agreed to the experiment. As soon as the consultation finished, Flip reached for the guitar, and the family sang some evening prayers. Then Alinga went straight off to bed without being reminded. Leezah leaned against Romy's chair, while Romy plaited Leezah's thick curls. Leezah was half reading, half thinking. She was thinking about the junior youth group that was meeting in 2 days' time. At Nowruz, Leezah had decided to form a junior youth group. There were no junior youth group animators in Kellyton. A young woman named Ruha came from Limedale every 2 weeks, on Saturday afternoons, to run the group. Leezah invited 6 of her friends from school to join the group, and 3 of them joined. Ruha was accompanying some youth from Kellyton who were learning to become animators, so they also joined the sessions. So every second Saturday afternoon, 4 junior youth and 3 youth met at Fellowship Farm for the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. Sky Marie and Alinga desperately wanted to join the group. They begged and begged to be allowed to join. But Romy said that the junior youth group was only for junior youth. The group had met 6 times. It was studying breezes of confirmation. Leezah thought to herself that Alinga had just experienced confirmation. He set himself a noble goal, to not eat animals. And by the end of the evening, the whole family had agreed to try being vegetarians. On Saturday, the junior youth group was going to start its first service project. Leezah was very excited about it. Chapter 3: Service and Joy. On Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, Ruha arrived at Fellowship Farm with her van full of junior youth and youth. Leezah, Sky Marie and Alinga were waiting at the front gate when the van drove in. Ruha was 18 years old. She had already finished school. She had brown skin, red cheeks, sparkly eyes and curly hair. As soon as she stepped out of the car, her face lit up in a radiant smile, and she embraced all 3 Fitzgeralds at once in a big hug. Ruha had moved from Tonga to Tasmania to live for a year while she did her youth year of service. She loved Leezah, Sky and Ollie, and they adored her. Leezah wanted to be just like Ruha when she grew up. The rest of the junior youth and youth tumbled out of the van and headed into the house. The junior youth group met in the sunroom at the front of the house. So they all walked through the kitchen and living room, down the hall to the sunroom. Alinga and Sky Marie followed. They hoped that if they sat quietly as mice, no one would notice them. The group sat in a circle for prayers. "Lovely to have you with us, Ollie and Sky," said Ruha warmly. Ollie and Sky sat reverently, hoping that the prayers would start and that they would be able to stay. Then Romy appeared at the door of the sunroom. Ruha grinned up at Romy and down at the bowed heads. "Ollie, Sky, wonderful reverence, but let's practice obedience. Time to take Flea, Flex and Fizz for a walk." Ollie and Fizz sloped out of the room, wishing desperately that they could be junior youth. Sky still had 2 years, but Ollie had another 4. Romy pulled the sunroom door shut behind them. Ruha reached for the guitar that Leezah had taken to the sunroom earlier. Ruha's fingers on the strings seemed to create magic. They made the most beautiful sounds come from the guitar. Ruha's beautiful voice also brought the prayers to life. It was easy to be reverent when listening to Ruha sing. The junior youth sang the quotes they had already learnt in the group. "Regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value," they sang enthusiastically. And "let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path." Then Ruha spread a big piece of yellow card in the middle of the group. She asked each of them to think about the word service. She asked them to think about the question, what is service? She handed out felt pens, crayons, coloured paper, scissors and glue. She asked them to answer the question by writing, drawing or using collage. Leezah wrote the word fun in the middle of the card and surrounded it by balloons cut out of coloured paper. Someone else wrote the word sometimes in front of what Leezah had written, and also sometimes not. Someone else drew a picture of children washing their mum's car. One of the youth wrote, "Service is thinking of others," and drew lots of thought bubbles with pictures of people in them. Soon the card was covered in words and pictures. When they had finished, Ruha stuck a piece of paper along the bottom of the card. It said, "Service to the friends is service to the kingdom of God." The group had a long discussion about service. They all agreed they wanted to be of service to their community.
Ruha asked the group, "If we want to serve the community, we need to know what service the community needs, right?" "Right. So how can we know what the community needs?" Ruha continued. "Ask them," said one of the junior youth. "So, shall we go ask our community what service would be helpful?" "Yes!" Because the farms along the road between Kellyton and Choppy's Point were quite far apart, the group decided the best way to visit each family would be to drive. Romy had left apples and muesli bars for everyone on the kitchen table. The junior youth picked them up on their way through the kitchen and out to the car. When everyone had their seatbelts on, Ruha drove out of Fellowship Farm and turned right. When they came to the first farm, Ruha drove up the long driveway and parked out the front of the house. It was a large 2-story house. There was a car out the front. The junior youth climbed out of the van and went up to the front door. One of them knocked on the door. No one answered, but they could hear a dog barking inside the house. Another knocked more loudly. Still no one answered. "Should we knock again?" they asked Ruha. "What do you think? Would it be courteous to keep knocking?" The group agreed it would not be courteous. They climbed back into the van. The next farm had a small wooden house, like the house at Fellowship Farm. The junior youth climbed out of the van again and rang the big metal bell that was hanging at the front. A woman came to the door. She was about 65 years old and she had a toothbrush and hairbrush in her hand. She seemed a little surprised to see 7 young people at her door, but she smiled and said, "Hello, how may I help you?" Leezah and her friends suddenly realized that they had not thought about what they wanted to say. Leezah stepped forward. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson," she said. "Hello, Leezah. What are you up to then?" Mrs. Henderson, my friends and I are part of a junior youth group." "Oh, are you? That's nice. Is that like Girl Guides?" "Well, a bit." Leezah didn't really know what Girl Guides did. "We are participating in the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program, and we want to be of service to the community. So we have come to ask if we can be of any service to you and Mr. Henderson." "Oh!" Mrs. Henderson made the sign of a cross in front of her heart. "Bless you, Leezah. Surely the angel sent you." Mrs. Henderson started to weep a little. "What do you mean, Mrs. Henderson?" Leezah asked. Mrs. Henderson explained that her husband had had a heart attack the day before. He was being taken to a hospital in Melbourne for care and might need surgery. Mrs. Henderson was just in the middle of packing her things. She was going to the airport that night to fly to Melbourne, but she didn't know what to do with her dog, Bernadette. The dog was old, but fit and healthy. She needed to be fed each day and walked. She asked the junior youth if they would care for her dog while she was away. The junior youth said they would. Mrs. Henderson took each of them by the hand and thanked them with eyes full of gratitude. Then she took them around to the backyard and introduced them to the dog. Bernadette was a large, fat, friendly Labrador. Mrs. Henderson showed them where the dog slept, in a basket on the patio outside the back door. She showed them where the bowls, the food, and the leash were kept. She gave Leezah her mobile phone number. Then she thanked them very much once again. The group left Mrs. Henderson to her packing and climbed back into the van. Inside the van, they started to consult. Only Leezah lived out on the same road as the Hendersons' farm. The rest of the group lived in Kellyton. It would be impossible for them to get out to Mrs. Henderson's house each day. But if only Leezah took care of the dog,
It wasn't really a group service project.
Maybe we could ask the school if we could keep the dog at school for the week. Then we could take it in turns to feed, walk, and clean up after Bernadette during lunch times, suggested one of the members.
That's a great idea, said another. Leezah agreed to take care of the dog on Sunday. And then on Monday, they would talk with the principal about their junior youth group, the service project, and the idea to keep the dog at school. It seemed like a great idea. The junior youth group visited a few more houses. One of the farmers asked the group to shear his sheep for him, but luckily he was only joking. The other family said they didn't need any service done, but they all said the group and the idea of service was a good one. As Ruha drove the junior youth back to Fellowship Farm, Leezah felt a great joy in her heart. It felt a bit like flying. Chapter 4, Bernadette Gets Stuck. On Saturday afternoon, when the family returned from shopping at the Kellyton Market, Romy drove Leezah, Sky Marie and Ollie to the Hendersons' property. Bernadette was happy to see them. She wagged her whole backside from side to side and dropped saliva from her panting tongue. The children gave her lots of cuddles. Then they collected her basket, bowls, leash and food and put them in the back of the ute. Leezah had rung Mrs. Henderson in Melbourne and asked if it was okay to bring Bernadette to Fellowship Farm. Mrs. Henderson said it was a wonderful idea, as Bernadette would be so lonely on her own. The puppies were already tied up on the back of the ute. They were very excited to see Bernadette and strained at their leashes trying to peer over the side of the tray. It was then that the family recognized their first problem. Bernadette was a big old dog. There was no way she could jump into the back of the ute the way the puppies did. She would also be very heavy and awkward to lift in, and her balance on the back of the moving ute may not be very good.
She could come in the cabin with us,
suggested Sky Marie. Romy nodded. Sky opened the back door of the ute. Bernadette, with a bit of a gentle shove from the children, clambered in. The children clambered in after her. When Romy drove in to Fellowship Farm, she did not stop at the farmhouse. They had decided to take the dogs for a walk on the sand dunes behind the farm. Winter was a good time to walk on the dunes because it was hard work, and in summer it was very hot. Romy drove up the hill paddock, through the apple orchard, down the side of the horse paddock to where the bush started. Then she parked the ute. Bernadette managed to clamber out of the ute by herself. The children untied Flea, Flex and Fizz from the back of the ute. The puppies rushed to jump off and meet their new friend. At first, Bernadette was overwhelmed by the excited puppies. She gave a yelp and nipped Flex on the bottom. Then the puppies ran off to explore the bush and left Bernadette in peace. Romy and the children followed the trail through the bush toward the dunes. The puppies raced ahead, darting off to the side, crashing through the undergrowth, chasing lizards, each other, their tails, flies and shadows. Bernadette followed at a good pace behind them, taking in the new smells. Soon the bush became thinner, and the ground sandier. Instead of trees, there were just clumps of grass. Then the bush gave way to rolling hills of sand. The dunes rolled on and on for several kilometers until they reached the long beach that stretched all the way to Choppy's Point. The dunes ended at the same beach on which Leezah, Sky Marie, Ollie, Anissa and Nick had found the pirates' buried bones when they were camping at the start of the year. But today they would not walk all the way to the beach. they would just enjoy a run on the dunes close to the farm. The children ran up the first dune, slipping and sliding on the soft sand, with the puppies scrambling after them. Romy and Bernadette came more slowly behind them. At the top of the dune, the children could see more dunes ahead, going down and then up again. While they waited at the top of the dune for Romy and Bernadette, they looked for bits of wood that had turned white and crumbly. The pieces had the shape and feel of the original hardwood, but crumbled to silky, soft sand in their hands. Romy and Bernadette made it to the top of the sand dune. Bernadette was panting hard. Romy gave her an encouraging pat. The puppies gathered around Bernadette again, sniffing and inviting her to play with them. "I think Bernadette and I had better wait here," said Romy. "I'm worried she might get too tired if she tries to walk another dune. She might get stuck and not have the energy to return to the car." Normally, when the Fitzgerald family ran on the sand dunes, Romy was one of the fastest and keenest. Sky Marie knew it was a sacrifice for Romy to sit with Bernadette instead of run on the dunes with the rest of them. She said, "I'll stay with Bernadette, Mummy. You have a run on the dunes." "That's kind and thoughtful, Sky Marie," said Romy, "but I'll be fine here with Bernie." Sky Marie gave her mother a hug. Then she yelled out, "Race you to the bottom! Last one there's a rotten egg!" The children and puppies charged off down the dune, while Alinga, who was leading the way, yelled out, "First one there has to eat it!" The flurry of activity caused excitement in Bernadette, who picked herself up and lunged down the dune after the other dogs and children. Romy jumped up after her, but Bernadette was already running, sliding, rolling down the dune with the others. She let out barks of excitement and yelps of pain as her old body tumbled down the sandy mountain. Some seconds later, 4 sandy dogs and 4 sandy human beings arrived at the bottom, with grit in their hair, fur, eyes, ears, and noses. 8 heads shook from side to side, creating a shower of sand. The dune ahead was even bigger than the one behind them. It towered before them like a yellow Everest reaching up to the clear blue winter sky. "Are you ready?" cried Leezah. "Let's go!" She started to scramble up the tower of sand. For every 2 meters she climbed, she slid back 1 meter. It was very slow going. The puppies were also struggling. At the bottom, Bernadette was giving it a good Aussie go, but making very slow progress. Very soon, the winter jackets, hats, and gloves felt way too hot. The children tucked their hats and gloves into the pockets of their jackets and left the jackets lying on the sand, halfway up the dune. They would collect them on the way back. After 20 minutes of slippery struggle, the children and puppies arrived at the top of the sand dune, panting, thirsty, hot, sweaty, and sandy. Bernadette watched them from below, where she had given up the struggle a while earlier. Romy sat with Bernadette, rubbing the neck, back, and legs of the old dog. From the top of the dune, the children could just see the sea, off in the hazy distance, past many kilometers of sandhills. Suddenly, with a cry of "Ya Bahá'í-inspired," Sky Marie threw herself back down the dune. Leaping, falling, rolling her way back toward her mother and Bernadette. Leezah and Alinga followed closely behind, grabbing their jackets as they tumbled down the hill. The puppies skidded and slid, tumbled and bounded down the dune behind them, with sand in their ears, eyes, and on their hot pink tongues. When they arrived at the bottom, they were faced with the second challenge pertaining to Bernadette.
This challenge was much greater than the challenge of getting her into the ute. The family had to work out how they were going to get the fat old Labrador back up and over the sand dune to go home. The first strategy they tried was encouragement. The Fitzgeralds went ahead of her up the slope and called her name, patting their legs and encouraging her to follow. Bernadette did her best, but her slow movements were no match for the quickly slipping sand. The next strategy was to push her from behind. They hoped that if they helped her up the hill, Bernadette would also put in an effort. But instead of putting in an effort, the dog dug her heels in and actively resisted the pushing. It was very uncomfortable for her to have 4 people pushing on her old bottom up a sandy hill, and she refused to go forward. After some thought, the family decided to try a third strategy. They tied all the jackets together to make a kind of sled. Then they helped Bernadette onto her magic carpet. Together, the family pulled the dog up the sand hill. It was very hard work, and only through their great unity and cooperation was it possible. Just as they reached the top of the hill, there was a loud rip, and the sleeve of Alinga's jacket tore right off. But no one was worried about Alinga's jacket at that point. They just wanted to make sure Bernadette didn't go sliding back down the hill. They all rushed to grab her and help her over the final peak of the dune. When they had reached the top and made sure Bernadette was firmly planted on the correct side of the dune heading down toward the bush, the ute and the farm, the Fitzgeralds collapsed in a sweaty heap. Every muscle of every arm and leg ached. Chapter 5, Prayers and Preparation. When they arrived back at the farmhouse, the number 1 priority was water. The dogs, the children and Romy felt they were dying of thirst. Romy tiptoed into the kitchen, trying not to drop sand, and grabbed some plastic cups. Back out in the garden, the children filled the dogs' water bowls and watched them lap thirstily. They then filled the cups and did the same. After they had quenched their burning thirst, it was time to get clean. So that the sand would not be spread all through the house, Romy asked the children to take off all their clothes outside. The children stripped off their sandy layers until they were down to their underpants. When they had brushed as much sand as possible from their now freezing bodies, they ran through the house to Romy and Flip's bathroom and jumped into the spa that was filling with warm, soapy water. After an hour in the warm bath, the bubbles had all burst, fingers had turned to prunes, and the bottom of the tub was covered with sand. Leezah pulled out the plug and they wrapped themselves in the towels that Romy had thoughtfully placed near the spa for them. When they had put on their pajamas, dressing gowns and slippers, they went back to the spa and cleaned all the sand out of the bottom of the tub. Flip came in just as they were finishing. He was wearing an apron over his farm clothes. "Well, thank you for your cleanliness, thoughtfulness, and consideration. As a reward, there will be dinner this evening." "Daddy, we have dinner every evening," said Sky Marie.
"Well, I expect you can add gratitude to your list of virtues then," said Flip. "This is turning into a virtues festival."
"What's for dinner?"
asked Leezah, putting her hand over her father's mouth.
"I am starving."
"Vegetarian lasagna," replied Flip. When Leezah released her hand to let him speak. "Prepared by an extraordinarily beautiful chef and her extraordinarily handsome kitchen hand. It is now ready to be served." Ollie, Leezah, Flip and Romy set the table and served dinner, while Sky Marie went to give the wallaby its evening feed. This would be the last evening feed of milk. From Monday, the wallaby would only have 1 feed of milk per day, which would be in the mornings. In 2 weeks' time, the family planned to take it to the back paddock and encourage it to return to the bush. So it needed to be gradually weaned before then. When Sky came back inside, she was jumping from the cold and raced to the fireplace to heat up before sitting down to dinner. She stood with her back to the fire and said, "Poor Bernadette is fast asleep in her basket in the boot room. She didn't even stir when I went to get my boots."
Bernadette the boot camp survivor, said Flip, dishing the lasagna onto each of the plates.
"What's boot camp?" Sky asked, sitting down at the table.
Boot camp is where you go camping wearing nothing but boots, replied Flip.
"In the Rudy Nudie?" asked Sky. "But Bernadette didn't wear boots," said Alinga.
True. Bernadette is the poor camp survivor, said Flip.
"Let's say your prayer, Sky, and eat before Mr. Goosehead here creates more confusion," Rummy pleaded.
"I wonder how the Hendersons are going in Melbourne," Leezah wondered. "Imagine having a heart attack." "Yes, and going to the hospital so far away." "And poor Mrs. Henderson must be so worried, and she is far away from all her friends too." "If we made them a card, could we send it to them at the hospital in Melbourne?" Leezah asked.
"Yes," said Rummy. "I think that's a splendid idea." After dinner was eaten and the dishes were washed, Leezah, Sky Marie and Alinga sat back up at the dining table with coloured cardboard, felt pens, glitter and glue to make cards for Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. They decided to put 1 line from the healing prayer in each card. So Leezah wrote, "Thy name is my healing, O my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy." Sky wrote, "Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion." Alinga wrote, "Thy mercy to me is my healing and my succour in both this world and the world to come." In the middle of making the cards, the phone rang. Flip was in the kitchen making the school lunches for the next day, so he answered the phone, but with an English accent.
Good evening, Fitzgerald residents. How may I be of assistance?
Flip leaned through the doorway of the kitchen and said,
Miss Fitzgerald Sr., a phone call for you.
The children hardly ever received phone calls. Leezah jumped up and ran to the phone. It was Ruha. "Hi, Leezah," said Ruha joyfully. "Hi, Ruha," said Leezah. "How was day 1 of the service project?"
"Oh, it was great, except we nearly killed Bernadette."
"Oh," exclaimed Ruha, laughing. "Tell me more." Leezah started to giggle. She told Ruha about Bernadette's boot camp. Ruha asked her if she was feeling ready to talk to the principal of Kellyton Primary School about the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program and their service project. Leezah felt her heart beat faster. She had forgotten about that. Ruha helped her think about what she might need to take from the Baha'i supplies cupboard. She also helped her think about how to talk to the principal about the service project. When the phone call finished, Leezah felt confident about talking to the principal.
"Thank you, Ruha," she said. "It's been very helpful talking to you."
"You're welcome, Cherub." Leezah went to the Baha'i supplies cupboard and took some pamphlets on the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program and put it in her bag. Tomorrow, she would give one to the principal. When Leezah came back to the table to finish her card, she saw that Alinga and Sky Marie had finished theirs already.
"Want some help, sister?" asked Ollie. "Yes, please," said Leezah. "Let's stick the glitter on together."
Together they quickly finished the cards and put away their art supplies. The children left the cards on the table so the glue could dry. Romy promised to take them to the post office the next day. As Flip examined their work, he exclaimed,
"Captivating creativity, edifying excellence, and unassailable unity. Bravo, bravo!"
Before the family had their evening prayers, Leezah asked them to pray that she would do a good job talking to the principal the next day. "We shall pray for you to be a pure channel, darling," promised Romy. Flip reached for the guitar and started to play.
"O God, make me a hollow reed from which the pith of self hath been blown, that I may become a pure channel through which thy love may flow unto others."
Chapter 6, Qualms and Courage. A light rain was falling as Leezah, Sky Marie and Alinga said goodbye to Flea, Flex, Fizz, Bernadette and Joey. They went to wait for the school bus. When it arrived at 7:30, they climbed on, greeting the bus driver.
"Good morning, Ms. Rowbottom."
"Look at your dirty shoes making a mess of my bus," grumbled Miss Rowbottom.
She pulled the door shut with the lever next to her seat. The children chose their seats near the middle of the bus. They were the first to be picked up, so they could sit anywhere. As the bus stopped at farms along the way to Kellyton, their schoolmates joined them, and soon the bus was full of chattering children, sharing news of their weekend. One of the younger boys sat across the aisle from Leezah and Sky, reading a book. A boy from Leezah's class, Wayne, leaned over from the seat behind and grabbed the book, knocking the younger boy in the head as he did so. Wayne pretended to read the book out loud, making up the words, using a squeaky voice. Then he threw the book to his friend at the back of the bus. The younger boy didn't turn around. He focused his attention out the window and pulled his knees up to his chest. Leezah could see he was afraid of the big Year 6 student. Sky Marie stood up from her seat and faced the back of the bus.
"Give it back, Wayne," she said courageously.
"Make me," said Wayne, sticking out his tongue. The book was being thrown about the back of the bus. Sky stood up and walked to the back of the bus, holding on to the seat so she wouldn't fall over as Ms. Rowbottom dodged the potholes. As the book flew through the air, Sky Marie reached out to grab it. She missed and fell on top of the boy who had thrown it. He pushed her and she fell on the floor of the bus. Suddenly, Ms. Rowbottom slammed on the brakes of the bus. Sky slid on the floor, collecting mud and gravel on her clean school uniform. "Sky Marie Fitzgerald, Wayne Jones, up the front now!" she hollered. Sky Marie stood up and tried to wipe off the mud that was smeared all down the back of her pants. As she walked down the aisle, Wayne followed her. "Sit!" barked Ms. Rowbottom, pointing to the 2 empty seats at the front of the bus. When the 2 children were seated, the bus continued its journey toward Kellyton Primary. Leezah picked up the book from where it had fallen on the floor of the bus and gave it back to the boy who had been reading it. Leezah then snuck down to the front of the bus, hoping Ms. Rowbottom wouldn't see her and get cross. The other children watched her and thought she was going to confront Sky Marie. But when she got to the front of the bus, she sat herself in the seat next to Wayne. Wayne was surprised to see Leezah, and even more surprised to see she was smiling at him.
"Hey, Wayne," she said. "Hey," Wayne replied. "What did you do on the weekend?"
Wayne was expecting Leezah to have a go at him about what he had done. He felt confused.
Nothing,
he answered. Then he added,
watch TV.
Boring, said Leezah.
Yep. We had junior youth group at my place this weekend,
Leezah said.
What's that?
Wayne asked. Leezah told Wayne about the group and about the service project they were working on that week. She invited him to join the group. Wayne asked,
Is it all girls?
Leezah nodded.
Yuck,
said Wayne.
But the program is for boys and girls. If you join the group, you could invite some of your friends too. It's great if there are boys and girls in the group.
Leezah had some flyers about the program in her bag to give to the principal. Just as the bus pulled up at the school, she pulled one out and gave it to Wayne. Wayne shoved it in his bag and jumped off the bus. Leezah went to Sky Marie to see if there was a pair of pants in lost property that she could borrow for the day, as her pants were covered in mud. Mr. Springbet was in charge of lost property and first aid. He was in his office when they arrived. "Hello, Leezah. Hello, Sky Marie," he said. "Have you been rolling in the mud?" Mr. Springbet had 2 pairs of navy blue uniform pants in lost property. One was very tight and one was too long. Sky chose the long pants and rolled them up. She put her muddy pants in a plastic bag that Mr. Springbet gave her. The sisters thanked Mr. Springbet and went to class. As it got closer to recess, Leezah found it harder and harder to concentrate. At recess, she was going to talk to the principal about the junior youth program. She was also going to ask if Bernadette could stay at the school for the week. She wondered what the principal would say. Leezah hoped she wouldn't forget what she wanted to say to the principal. By the time the bell rang for the end of class, Leezah was feeling so nervous she jumped at the sound of the bell and nearly fell off her chair. The girls in the junior youth group gathered outside the Year 6 classroom. They walked together to the principal's office. To get to the principal's office, they had to go through the office of her secretary. As they walked in, Leezah saw Wayne sitting on the couch, waiting for the principal. "Girls," said the secretary, looking up from his computer, "what are you after?" Leezah swallowed anxiously. The other girls on either side of her squeezed her hands.
We'd like to see Miss Vierma, please."
"What about?"
"About a service project we're doing, and about the junior youth program," said Leezah timidly.
"Well, Miss Vierma is on the phone at the moment, and then she will need to see Wayne. But if you'd like to wait, she may have time to see you just before the end of recess." The girls nodded and sat down on the long couch against the wall next to Wayne. Just as they sat down, they heard Miss Vierma hang up the phone. Her door opened and she came into the waiting area. "Hello, Wayne. Hello, girls," she said as the children stood up to greet their principal. "Are you all together?"
"Yes,"
said Leezah, surprising herself. "Actually, no," said the secretary, thinking that Leezah was trying to push in and see the principal without waiting. Before she had time to think, Leezah said,
"Miss Vierma, maybe if you see us all together, you won't need to see Wayne afterward."
Everyone looked puzzled, especially Wayne. But Miss Vierma nodded and welcomed the children into her office. In Miss Vierma's office, there were only 3 chairs, but there were 5 children, so they all stood. "How can I help?" asked Miss Vierma, seated behind her desk. Everyone looked at Leezah. Leezah said a prayer in her head. "Ya Bahá'í-inspired, Ya Bahá'í-inspired." She prayed that Abdul-Baha would be with her. And then she began to speak. Leezah told the principal about the junior youth program and gave her the flyer. She also told her about Mr. Henderson's heart attack and the group service project.
She asked if Bernadette could stay at the school for a week so the members of the group could share the work of caring for her. Then Leezah said that she had invited Wayne to join the group. Leezah suggested that instead of giving Wayne detention for his bullying on the bus, maybe Ms. Vierma might let him off if he agreed to join the junior youth program. Ms. Vierma listened carefully to all that Leezah said. Then she said, "Thank you for telling me about this, Leezah. This sounds like a wonderful program and a very important service project. I think we can find a place for Bernadette in the fenced area right next to the kindergarten. I will talk to Mr. Springbett about setting up a place for her. As you suggest, Leezah, your group can spend recess, lunch, and some time after school feeding, walking, and cleaning up after Bernadette. If Wayne would like to try the program, I am more than happy for him to do that instead of detention. And I think we should tell all the Year Sixers about this program. Would you girls be happy to talk about it to your class?" Leezah felt a wave of relief and joy flood over her. Inside her head, she said again, "Ya Bahola Pa." The other girls looked nervous about talking in front of the class, but Leezah said,
Yes, we would love to.
Ms. Vierma turned to Wayne and said, "Wayne, would you like to try the junior youth program? Or would you like to stay and have a chat with me?"
"The program," said Wayne without hesitation.
He had quite a few chats with the principal this year, and he didn't want to have any more. Chapter 7, Quest for a Cruise. The children left the principal's office just before the bell for the end of recess rang. Leezah hurried to the front office to call her mother. "How did it go?" asked Romy when she answered the phone.
"It was great,"
said Leezah loudly. The office staff looked up from their computers and scowled. "I will tell you everything tonight," Leezah continued more quietly.
"But could you please bring Bernadette to school when you come in to work this afternoon? Ms. Vierma said she can stay for the week."
"Well done, courageous girl," said Romy with delight. "I will bring her to the school at lunchtime. See you then, my darling." Leezah hung up the phone, thanked the office staff, and went outside to join Wayne and the other junior youth. The bell rang, and they walked back to the Year 6 classroom together. Before class started, Leezah got Wayne's home phone number so Ruha could talk to Wayne's parents about the junior youth program. Once again, it was hard for Leezah to concentrate on her work. But this time, it wasn't because she was nervous. It was because she was bursting with joy. She had practiced courage and determination, drawing on prayer and trust in God, and the junior youth group had experienced immediate confirmation. At lunchtime, Romy pulled into the school in the orange ute. Leezah and the junior youth were waiting for her under the oak tree. When Romy opened the door and Bernadette lumbered out, she was immediately surrounded by children. Romy clipped the leash onto Bernadette's collar. Everyone wanted to be the one to hold the leash while Bernadette walked to her new temporary home. Leezah suggested Wayne be the one to hold the leash. The other 3 members of the group thought that was a very unfair idea. In the end, the 3 girls in the junior youth group, other than Leezah, all held the leash together. Many children gathered around to find out what was going on. They helped Wayne, Leezah, and Romy to carry the dog bed, food, brush, and doggy-doo bags from the car to the fenced area near the kindergarten. They filled the bowls with food and water and placed Bernadette's basket under the roof of the open shed. Bernadette was having a lovely time, being patted and fussed over. She was very happy to have some extra food in the middle of the day. She then wandered around the grassy area, sniffing the new smells. She was followed by a large group of excited children who were taking it in turns to brush her. The junior youth thought it would be a good idea to make up a roster to care for Bernadette. She would need food and water each day. She would need to be walked. She would need to have her poo cleaned up and her fur brushed. Some of the members of the group didn't have to catch the school bus home after school, so they promised to care for her after school. Leezah and Wayne promised to care for her at recess and lunch, and they all agreed to check on her before school. When the bell for the end of lunch rang, Romy hugged Leezah and said goodbye to the other students. As Romy drove off to the veterinary clinic, many arms waved her goodbye. The children went to their classrooms to finish their school day. In her classes after lunch, Leezah again had trouble concentrating. This time, it was because she was thinking about Ms. Viema's request for Leezah to talk to the whole Year 6 class about the Junior Youth Program and the Service Project. She had an idea, and once it got into her head, Leezah couldn't get it out. Leezah wanted to take photos of her junior youth group and make a PowerPoint presentation. She would photograph them with their animator, Ruha, doing their study, doing their art activities, and playing their games. Then she would take photos of Bernadette and the service project, and she would put it together with some captions and music to present to her class. On the bus on the way home, Leezah told Sky Marie about what Miss Viema had said and about her idea.
"The only problem is we don't have a camera,"
said Sky.
"Why? What do you want a camera for?"
asked Wayne, who was sitting behind them and had caught the last part of their conversation. Leezah turned to face him. She explained the idea she had for presenting the program to the class.
"I have a camera,"
said Wayne, tossing a dirty tennis ball in the air and catching it.
"I got it from my grandmother for Christmas. It's digital."
Leezah wasn't sure if Wayne was offering his camera or bragging.
"We could use that to take the photos,"
he added. Leezah grinned.
"Thanks, Wayne."
Wayne agreed to bring the camera to school the next day to take photos of Bernadette and the junior youth. That evening, after the children had finished their chores, Leezah shared the exciting events of the day with the rest of the family. The family was making vegetable soup for dinner, with fruit salad for dessert. As it was the middle of winter, it was expensive to buy fresh fruit. Flip passed Leezah a can of pineapples to open. Before she opened the can, Leezah read the label. Next to the picture of pineapple slices was a picture of a large boat. Leezah read that by sending 2 labels from the pineapple cans, she could enter into a competition to go on a family cruise. Leezah checked the cupboard to see if there were any more tins of pineapple. She found 3 more.
"Daddy, may we enter into this competition?"
asked Leezah.
"If we win, we get to go on a cruise." "Like my friend Laurie,"
said Sky Marie. "Of course we can enter," replied Flip. "First we need to make dinner. Then you can take the labels off the cans and fill them out."
"Thanks, Daddy,"
said Leezah. After dinner, Leezah called Ruha. She told her all about the conversation with the principal and gave her Wayne's mother's phone number. A few minutes later, Ruha called Leezah back to say Wayne's mother said he could come to the group if he wants to. Ruha told them she would pick him up on the way through to Fellowship Farm in 2 weeks' time. While Sky and Alinga read by the fire, Leezah cut the labels off the pineapple cans. Using a permanent pen, she wrote,
"Pineapples in juice,"
on the silver cans, so that they would remember what was in them. She then filled in the questions on the inside of the labels. The first questions were easy. Name, address, phone number.
Then Leezah had to say in 20 words or less why they wanted to go on the cruise. "Why do we want to go on the cruise?" she asked her family. "We only have 20 words to answer the question." The Fitzgeralds realized they didn't really have any idea what a cruise would be like. The label of the pineapple can said the boat would go to many different countries in the Pacific Ocean. In the end, Leezah wrote, "We want to unite the world, so it would be good to visit our brothers and sisters in other countries." It was exactly 20 words. She put the labels in an envelope and addressed it according to the instructions. She added a stamp from the stationery cupboard. She asked Romy to post it the next day. Romy said she would. There was still an hour until Leezah's bedtime when she sat down to have her hair plaited for bed. After a busy day, Leezah was exhausted. The family sang their evening prayers with much joy. To everyone's surprise, Leezah kissed her parents goodnight and went off to bed at the same time as Alinga. Lying in bed, she reflected on her day. She was glad she had invited Wayne to the junior youth group. She was thankful that Mr. Springbet had some clean pants for Sky Marie. She was grateful for Abdul-Baha's help at the principal's office. She was very happy that the principal had agreed to have Bernadette at the school. She was relieved that Wayne's mother had agreed to Wayne joining the junior youth group. She hoped Wayne would also invite some of his friends. And she also hoped that the entries into the competition from the pineapple cans would win them a trip on a big boat. That was Leezah's final thought as she quickly drifted off to sleep. Chapter 8: Giving is Getting. When the children woke the following morning, the air in the bedroom was very cold. They could hear pouring rain pelting against the windows and the roof of the farmhouse. After prayers and breakfast, the children dressed in their warmest clothes, raincoats, rain hats and gumboots, and piled into the ute. Flip drove them around the farm in the dark and rain, so they could attend to their morning chores without getting drenched. They took it in turns to jump out of the ute at the pigsty, the shed where the working dogs were tied up, and the hen house. And when they got back to the farmhouse, Alinga fed the wallaby some milk, while Sky Marie fed the puppies, and Leezah fed the pigeons. When they finished their morning service, they shook the water from their raincoats and boots and left them hanging in the boot room. When they arrived at school at 8:10, it was still raining. Alinga and Sky Marie hurried off to their classrooms. Leezah and Wayne went from the bus to Bernadette. The other junior youth were already there, sheltered under the shed roof. In the rain, the service project didn't seem like so much fun. Bernadette's wet fur stank, so no one wanted to brush her. There were 2 poos on the cement floor of the shed to clean up. Taking Bernadette for a walk in the cold rain was very uninviting, and her food bowl was full of ants. Reluctantly, the junior youth began to attend to the tasks. As soon as they had finished, they rushed off to the toilets to wash their hands and hurried into their warm classrooms. Wayne had brought the camera, and Leezah took some photos of Bernadette and the junior youth. But the sky was grey, so the photos were dark. And the junior youth did not seem very joyful as they served. At recess time, Leezah went to check on Bernadette, but Wayne was nowhere to be seen. Bernadette sat in her basket with her head between her paws. Leezah didn't want to smell like wet dog for the rest of the day, but she felt sorry for Bernadette. She gave her a rub down with the brush until just before the bell. Because she was with Bernadette, Leezah didn't have time to eat her recess snack.
During her classes between recess and lunch, Leezah's tummy growled with hunger. By lunchtime, the rain had stopped. The air was still cold, and the grass was soggy. Bernadette smelled like a mixture of mouldy old carpet and a swamp. The junior youth checked on her quickly. They complained about the cold, and after a few minutes they hurried back to their classroom.
I hope the Hendersons come back soon,
said one of the girls.
I'm sick of taking care of Bernadette.
It had been less than 1 day.
Me too,
another agreed.
Me 3.
The junior youth took care of Bernadette for the rest of the week. Sometimes it was fun, and sometimes there were fights over who took her for a walk around the school ground. Sometimes it was not fun, and dog poo had to be cleaned off shoes and fingers. The junior youth complained about Bernadette some days, and smothered her in cuddles on other days. Leezah took photos of everything. On Friday morning, Mrs. Henderson called Romy to say that she and Mr. Henderson would be returning to the farm that afternoon. Romy sent a message to Leezah, Sky and Ollie through the school office. She told them to wait at school and not catch the bus. After she had finished her work, Romy came to the school in the ute and collected the children, Bernadette and Bernadette's belongings. They stopped at the Hendersons' farm on the way home to return the dog to her home. They settled Bernadette back into her regular place on the back porch and filled her bowls with food and water. Just as they were getting back into the ute, the Hendersons arrived from the airport. Mr. Henderson looked pale and frail. Mrs. Henderson and Romy helped him into the house. When he was settled in a comfortable chair, Mrs. Henderson came back outside and turned her attention to the children.
Thank you for your beautiful cards, she said. We received them yesterday.
The children smiled. Then Mrs. Henderson turned her attention to Leezah. How was Bernadette? She asked with tears in her eyes. We were so grateful to know she was being cared for by a Girl Guides group. Leezah remembered all the times the group had complained and grumbled about taking care of Bernadette. She remembered the times the junior youth had rushed their service and hurried to get back to the warm classroom. She felt embarrassed by Mrs. Henderson's gratitude and unworthy of the praise.
It was our pleasure, said Leezah. Thank you for trusting us with Bernadette.
Mrs. Henderson reached into the back of her car. She pulled out a bag with 4 little presents, carefully wrapped. Mrs. Henderson didn't know there was a new 5th member of the group. Leezah realised that even though it was a very difficult time for Mrs. Henderson in Melbourne, she had taken the time to get thank you gifts for the junior youth. Leezah felt very embarrassed.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Henderson,
she said, accepting the bag of gifts. Sky Marie and Alinga were very curious to know what was inside the boxes wrapped in purple paper tied with white ribbon. No, thank you, my dear. Please convey our gratitude to the members of your group.
I will,
promised Leezah. When the Fitzgeralds were in the ute and on their way home, Alinga said,
Open the present, Leezah! Open the present!
Leezah shook her head. Alinga pleaded.
Can I then? Please! Can I open it for you?
No, Ollie, said Leezah.
Why not?
said Alinga.
Aren't you busting to see what it is?
Leezah nodded.
I want to see what's inside too, but Mrs. Henderson didn't know we now have 5 members of our group. So I need to give my present to Wayne. He helped nearly every day.
I honour your sacrifice, Leezah, said Romy quietly, smiling as she drove.
Oh no, I don't, said Alinga. It might be yummy chocolates.
But Alinga wasn't really upset, just curious. In fact, he really admired how strong and selfless his sister was.
Can I just have a little peek and then wrap it again?
Leezah laughed. She knew what the wrapping would look like after Ollie's little peek.
No, Ollie, you'll have to wait till we catch the bus on Monday and Wayne opens his present.
Wayne was known on the bus for being a bit of a bully, so it was unusual for him to be greeted warmly on the bus, especially by younger children. Everyone was usually a bit scared of him. He was very surprised when he got on the bus on Monday morning to find Alinga waiting for him at the very front seat. Alinga had a big smile on his face and a small purple gift in his hand.
This is for you,
he exclaimed, thrusting the gift at Wayne.
What for?
Asked Wayne, walking toward the back of the bus, followed by Alinga as Ms. Rowbottom shut the bus door.
It's from Mrs. Henderson to say thank you for taking care of Bernadette. Do you want to open it?
Asked Alinga. Wayne swung into a seat near the back of the bus. Alinga climbed in after him.
Sure,
said Wayne, dropping his school bag on the floor.
What do you think it is?
Asked Alinga excitedly.
Dunno,
replied Wayne.
Maybe a pony.
Wayne started to open the gift, but as he did so, he realized how excited Alinga was about it. He tossed the gift to Alinga.
Why don't you open it?
Thanks, Wayne, exclaimed Alinga. Wayne half smiled, half smirked at Alinga, but inside he was feeling something he hadn't felt before. It felt good. Alinga opened the gift. Inside was a box of chocolate-covered toffees.
Oh, look! Toffees!
Exclaimed Alinga.
Here go, Wayne.
Alinga reluctantly passed the box and wrapping paper to Wayne.
You can have them, Alinga,
said Wayne, surprising even himself. As soon as he said those words, he felt a burst of happiness in his heart. And so did Alinga. Chapter 9, Goodbye, Joey. Every morning for the rest of the week, Alinga went to have a chat with the wallaby in the front garden. The wallaby was no longer given milk, just a few pellets. It snuffed around Alinga's waist, searching for the bottle. Alinga explained over and over again that he didn't have any milk, but the wallaby kept searching. Alinga was not looking forward to releasing the wallaby into the bush on the weekend. Saturday arrived. Alinga woke with a heavy heart, and Leezah woke with a joyful heart. Two things were happening. Ruha and the other animators, the junior youth and Wayne, were coming to Fellowship Farm for the junior youth group. At the same time, the Fitzgeralds, along with the junior youth group, were taking the wallaby to the bush to release it into the wild. As usual, when Ruha arrived with her van full of youth and junior youth, Leezah, Sky Marie and Alinga were waiting at the front gate to greet them. Ruha greeted each of them with an enormous smile and a bear hug. She looked into their faces and could immediately see that Alinga was not happy. My love, why are you sad today? She said to him, giving him an extra hug. The sadness in his heart and the loving kindness burning in Ruha's heart mixed together, and Alinga started to weep. As the other youth and junior youth piled out of the van and headed inside, Ruha scooped Ollie up in her strong brown arms and carried him into the house. He told Ruha about the plans to release the wallaby. He told her how very sad he felt about it. Ruha's tender heart couldn't bear to see Ollie suffering. She started to weep with Ollie, and soon both of them were sitting in the sunroom crying. After a few minutes, the rest of the group was settled and ready to start. Romy appeared at the doorway. Ollie and Sky reluctantly left the room with their mother. Ruha took a tissue from her sleeve and blew her nose. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. First, a very warm welcome to our new member Wayne, who has already participated in a service project. The group clapped and welcomed Wayne. Leezah snapped her first photos of the junior youth group in session and continued to quietly take photos for the rest of the session. To help Wayne understand more about the junior youth program, we are going to do an activity that some of us have done before, said Ruha after prayers. Ruha took out a round plastic container of dirt from her bag. She took the lid off and asked the group what they could see. Everyone said they could just see a bowl of dirt. Ruha especially asked Wayne. Wayne said he could see dirt and small rocks. Ruha smiled and said, "Well done, that's right." Then she passed the bowl to Wayne and asked him to see what he could find. Wayne stuck his fingers into the dirt and dug around. Soon he came across a glass gem, and then another and another. Ruha passed the bowl to the other junior youth, and they also found glass gems under the dirt. Ruha said, "So when we looked at this bowl, we thought there was just dirt in it, didn't we? But underneath the dirt, we found gems. People can be like that. Sometimes we look at each other and we don't much like what we see. But underneath the dirt, in every single one of us, are hundreds of gems." Ruha gave everyone a page with some words on it. "Wayne, could you please read this for us?" Wayne read, "Regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value." "Well done," said Ruha, smiling and nodding. "We are like mines rich in gems of great value. What do you think, Wayne? If we cut us open, would we find gold and silver inside us?" "No, duh," said Wayne. "So what are the gems inside of us?" Wayne wasn't sure how to answer, so the other junior youth helped him. "They are the virtues, like kindness and courage, helpfulness, assertiveness, obedience." "Yes," exclaimed Ruha. "And are these gems in all of us, or only in some of us?" "All of us," replied the junior youth. "But sometimes they are hidden deep down under the dirt," said Leezah, and everyone laughed. "True," said Ruha. Next, Ruha explained that after their next chapter of Breezes of Confirmation, the junior youth group was going to participate in releasing the wallaby into the bush. "What virtues or gems will we need to practice when we do that?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with love. "We will need gentleness and patience," said Leezah, "so the wallaby can slowly adjust to its new surroundings. We will also need compassion to support Alinga," said one of the junior youth, remembering Alinga's tears. "And we will need trust to let the wallaby go into the bush when we want to keep it here where we know it's safe." "Good one," said Ruha. "And if Romy gives us instructions, we will need to follow them. What's that called, Wayne?" Wayne wasn't really sure. Wayne felt like he was learning a new language. "That's okay," said Ruha as she saw Wayne wasn't sure. "It's called obedience." Wayne nodded. Ruha handed out the copies of Breezes of Confirmation, including a brand new copy for Wayne, with his name on the front. Ruha asked the junior youth to fill Wayne in on the story and concepts so far. Then they continued their study together. After the study, The group left the sunroom and joined Romy, Flip, Alinga and Sky Marie in the living room. From there, everyone went outside to put on their coats, hats, gloves and boots. In single file, they walked around to the front of the house, taking care not to let the puppies out of the back garden. Out the front of the house was the orange ute. The back of the tray was open. The youth and junior youth climbed in, along with Alinga and Sky Marie. Romy opened the cabin of the ute for Flip. He picked up the wallaby from the front garden and, holding it firmly, he climbed into the back of the ute cabin. Romy closed the tray and encouraged the young people to hold on tightly. Romy drove through the gate into the hill paddock behind the farmhouse. She continued through the apple orchard and over to the back of the property where the bush started. When she had parked the ute under a big old gum tree, the youth climbed off the back slowly and quietly. Romy opened the door of the cabin for Flip, who climbed out. Flip put the wallaby on the grass. At first, the wallaby seemed confused. Then it spotted Alinga and lolloped over to him. The wallaby started to snuffle around Alinga's waist, hoping for a treat. Alinga rubbed his hands through the wallaby's soft fur and started to cry again.
Off you go, little fella,
he said quietly.
Off you go home.
After some time, it was clear the wallaby was not going to head for the bush while its friends were there. Romy suggested they head back to the farmhouse. Alinga gave the wallaby one last goodbye stroke. With tears streaming down his face, he climbed into the back of the ute. The others gathered around him and embraced him in a big group hug all the way back down to the farmhouse. Chapter 10. Hello again, Joey. Back at the farmhouse, the junior youth group continued its session. It was preparing the presentation for the Year 6 class. Some of the photographs Leezah had taken were blurry. Some were too close, some too far away, but some were okay. The junior youth chose the best photos to use in the PowerPoint presentation for the class. Ruha helped them to get the photos off the camera and onto her laptop, and showed them how to use PowerPoint to make a presentation. The group included photos of the good times, digging in the dirt for gems, joyfully walking Bernadette around the school, opening their presents from Mrs. Henderson. And they chose photos that showed challenges, cleaning dog poo off their shoe, crying as the wallaby was released, walking Bernadette in the cold rain. They chose captions for the photos and music to go with their presentation. At first, nobody but Leezah had the courage to talk in front of the class. After Ruha led some discussion about confirmation, however, they all agreed to try and help with the presentation. Wayne said he would like to do the digging in the dirt for gems activity with the class. He would then talk about the virtues. The others thought this was a great idea. The junior youth made bookmarks with the quote, "Regard men as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value," on them, to give to the teacher and all the students. Ruha gave them registration forms which the students could take home to their parents to fill out if they wanted to join a junior youth group. By the time the junior youth group finished its session, the junior youth were excited about presenting to their class on Monday. The group finished with a prayer and a snack before heading out to the van. Alinga, Sky and Leezah stood at the gate of Fellowship Farm and waved to their friends until the van was completely out of sight. As they walked back to the house, the yard felt empty with no friends, no Joey, and no Bernadette. The sun was already sinking in the sky and the air was icy. The children went inside. Flip had just added some logs to the fire in the living room. The children consulted about whether to play Monopoly or Chinese checkers. After a few rounds of scissors, paper, rock, they agreed on Chinese checkers. They sat on the rug by the fire, moving the coloured marbles, until Sky Marie had all her marbles in the triangle opposite her starting place. Just as they packed up, Flip came into the living room from the kitchen and said, "How about some homemade vegetarian pizza for dinner?" "Yum!" the three of them agreed. Out in the kitchen, Romy put some music on. While they sang along to the barnyard boogie, the family grated cheese and chopped onions, capsicum, mushroom, pineapple, olives, and sun-dried tomatoes. They covered their pizza bases with tomato paste and toppings and slipped them into the oven to bake. 20 minutes later, the family was gathered around the dining table. Plates were covered in generously topped pizzas. Long strings of melted cheese stretched from plates to hungry mouths. Faces and fingers were covered in tomato paste and other toppings.
"I'm so glad that no animals died to make this pizza,"
said Alinga suddenly.
"I hope we never, ever eat meat again."
"I agree,"
said Leezah. "Let's make a toast," said Flip.
"Toast?"
asked Alinga. "A toast," said Flip. "Hold up your glasses." Everyone held up their glasses with their greasy fingers. "I hereby declare the Fitzgerald home to be vegetarian," Flip announced. "Hear, hear," cried Romy.
"Hear, hear."
The children copied their mother. The family clinked glasses and drank their juice. After dinner, the family sat by the fire to read and play cards. After a few minutes, Flip went to the kitchen and pulled a bag out of the pantry cupboard. It was full of something he had bought with Romy at the Kellyton markets that morning. He took the bag over to the fireplace.
"What's in there?"
asked Sky.
"I'll act it out for you, and if you guess it correctly, we can eat them."
"Charades!" cried Leezah. Alinga was more excited about what there might be to eat in the bag. Flip held up one finger. "One word," said Romy. Flip put his finger to his nose, which meant correct. Then he put 2 fingers of one hand against the opposite arm.
2 syllables,
said Leezah. Flip again touched the side of his nose. Then he put 1 finger against the opposite arm.
1st syllable,
said Sky. Flip nodded and pointed to his shirt.
Chocolate!
cried Alinga. Not because he thought that was the clue, but because he hoped that was what was in the bag. Flip shook his head vigorously and pointed again to the top half of his body.
Marshmallows!
cried Alinga. Flip silently lifted Alinga onto the couch and tickled him, before resuming.
Shirt, jumper, top, chest?
Flip banged his nose so vigorously that Alinga thought Flip would get a blood nose.
1st syllable, chest,
said Sky. Then Flip put 2 fingers against the opposite arm. 2nd syllable, called Romy. Flip acted out holding something small, breaking it open and eating the insides. Nut! cried Leezah. Again, Flip hit his nose so much with his hand that he seemed at risk of breaking it. Chestnut! cried Sky. Bravo! cried Flip. Inside the bag were shiny brown chestnuts. The children put them on the little shovel beside the fireplace and pushed them into the coals at the side of the fire. They left them there while they played cards and read. After about 15 minutes, there were some popping sounds coming from the fire. The children pulled the little shovel out and Flip tested the nuts. Together, Romy and Flip pulled the hot outer shell off the chestnuts, leaving the soft, warm nut exposed. The children ate the hot, sweet, creamy nuts while the next batch roasted in the fire. It was the perfect evening snack for a cold winter night. When the chestnuts were eaten and the shells were burning away on the fire, the children went to brush their teeth and get ready for prayers and bed. The next morning, when the children went out to attend to their morning chores, they were surprised to find a visitor waiting outside the front gate of the farmhouse. Leezah was carrying the pig scrap bucket, and Alinga was carrying the container for the eggs as they came around the corner of the house.
"Joey!"
exclaimed Alinga.
"What are you doing here?"
When Sky opened the gate, the Joey hopped through and immediately began to snuffle at Alinga.
"Hello, Joey."
Alinga's voice was full of delight.
"Did you miss us too?"
He gave the wallaby a rub between the ears.
"Come on, Ollie,"
called Leezah.
"It's chore time. We can talk with Mummy and Daddy about Joey later." "Bye, Joey,"
said Alinga reluctantly. As Alinga followed his sisters across the field to the pig pen, Joey followed. When Alinga turned and saw the wallaby following behind them, he started to laugh. After the children left the pig pen and walked up the hill to the shed to feed the farm dogs, Joey hopped after them. And sure enough, as they headed down the hill to the hen house to let the hens out and collect the eggs, Joey came along behind. Alinga was thrilled. When they arrived back at the farmhouse, Flea, Flex and Fizz were at the front gate. Now that Joey was no longer kept in the front garden, the puppies were free to roam all over the front and back garden. But the wallaby was not at all afraid of them. When the gate was open, he happily hopped through, back to his old home. Though the puppies were running around and occasionally came up and sniffed him, he seemed to be perfectly at ease. He followed the children and the puppies up the side of the house and came into the backyard. Flip and Romy were hanging some washing as the children, puppies and wallaby came into the backyard.
"Look, Mummy, Joey wants to live with us,"
said Ollie. Romy and Flip looked over at the wallaby. Romy looked at Flip. Flip shrugged his shoulders. "You the boss," he said with a grin. Romy went back to hanging washing. Ollie hoped if no one talked about it, the Joey would stay, so he didn't say anything more. The children got ready to go to school and went to wait for the bus. When Wayne got on the bus, the first thing he asked Leezah was,
"Do you have the PowerPoint presentation?"
Leezah grinned and nodded.
"Do you have the container with dirt and gems?"
she asked him back. He also nodded. At school, they went straight to the classroom. Some other students were there huddled around the heater at the back of the room. Their teacher was at her desk marking some homework. "Good morning, Wayne and Leezah," she said as the students approached her desk. "Are you ready for your presentation this morning?"
"Yes, we are,"
said Leezah.
"Here's the memory stick with the presentation."
The teacher took the memory stick and plugged it into her computer. There were no problems with the pictures or the sound. "Great! When the bell goes, you can start," the teacher said. Leezah and Wayne waited for the rest of the group to arrive. They gathered in a corner of the classroom and chatted about the presentation. Everyone was feeling nervous. Leezah was repeating a prayer to herself. When the bell rang, the other students took their seats at their desk. The junior youth group stood at the front of the classroom, ready to start. Just before they started, Ms. Viermer arrived. "I'd like to see it too, if that's okay," she said, and walked to the back of the classroom. The junior youth suddenly felt twice as nervous. Wayne started the presentation by asking the class what they could see in the bowl. Then he passed the bowl around so the students could dig in the soil. Straight away, the attention of all the students was fully focused on the presentation. Each junior youth gave their part of the presentation. Sometimes they forgot what they were going to say, but the other members of the group came to their rescue. At the end, the class clapped loudly. Leezah handed out the registration forms and invited anyone who wanted to join a junior youth group to fill out the form. All of Wayne's friends and most of the rest of the class took a registration form. Leezah felt like the junior youth group had been hit by gales of confirmation.